Hey guys, welcome to Capturing Christianity. Today I am joined by none other than Marc Lozano with Christ-Centered Capital. We're going to be talking about his story, his conversion from atheism to Christianity, and then also what he does as a living. And that's also it's a really cool story, the way that he transitioned and what he does now. But let's start by, we'll just jump right into the interview. Why don't you tell us a little about your background? Like, because you worked in the NBA for a little while, and then you eventually started Christ-Centered Capital. But let's start with, like, you were actually like a hardcore atheist for how many years?
Yeah, so context is key. I'll try to give as much context as quickly as possible. I was born Catholic, but not raised.
Okay.
So made the sacraments, didn't go to church. It was kind of just, a lot of people know that they just kind of go through a lot of Catholics just go through the motions, right? And my family was one of those families. And I think after I made my confirmation, I didn't go back to church from age 11. So in my mind, I'm like, all right, this is not something to be taken seriously. And that point of like not going back to church, not really being pushed to as a young kid, and growing up, I started to become more and more agnostic, then more and more atheistic. And I would always say I was agnostic, but if someone actually pushed me on it, I was definitely an atheist. And fast forward all the way to college.
Well, let's pause there real quick. So what was it like that made you an atheist or an agnostic?
So the fact that my family didn't really like make it a point to go to church, it was something like, oh, we shouldn't take this seriously. And then when my mom actually did give me pushback on it a little bit, I brought up one of the worst arguments ever of like the game of telephone. So I said in first grade, when you go through that whole game of telephone, I tell you, and then by the end of the 10th kid, like the story's completely different. I was like, how can we trust the Bible if we do that? It was a terrible argument, but it was an argument my 13-year-old mind made up and was like, it's sufficient. So why should I believe that or do anything about that? And then once I made that point of like, all right, the Bible's not anything serious, church isn't anything serious, then it put me down that path of just being, agnostic, atheistic, and just really hedonistic.
Okay. So yeah, that part, or that sort of the catalyst that made you go down the atheistic path, like you just said, like you don't think that that's actually a good reason, but that nevertheless was like the reason why you became an atheist around the age of 13. And then how long did that last?
So that lasted all the way up until probably the age of 24, 25.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you like during? Sorry, I'm like, I feel like I'm cutting you off a lot because I'm just super interested in your story. So during that time, did you come across other atheistic arguments that like maybe helped solidify your atheism, or were you just like kind of not interested?
I was definitely not interested for the big majority of that time span. I wasn't interested at all, and I was so focused on my own pleasure from high school into college and everything. I played basketball and I played basketball, was really big on like making sure that I had better grades in class. I was into athletics, academics, and like philosophy, theology, anything like that. It didn't even enter my mind after I kind of made the decision that like God wasn't of importance.
Yeah. But then, so continue the story. So like around the age of 24, 25, you started to look into things?
It started earlier than that, because when I went to college, I met my soon-to-be wife, or my future wife, and she was a cradle Catholic. And she had a very innocent faith, but she was very devout. We kind of like fell in love over basketball because she was on the women's team, I was on the guys' team. She was way better than me in guy-to-girl ratio. She was like a 1,000-point scorer and starter and everything, and I was, end of the bench kind of guy. But we fell in love over basketball, but we fought constantly, because of my uninterest in religion, or even my kind of like militant opposition to religion, especially Catholicism, because that was the one I was familiar with. And I was like, no, I know that's a bunch of nonsense in my mind at the time. And, but for whatever reason, we stuck it out, even though we argued constantly through, like, we started dating probably my sophomore year of undergraduate school, and we argued all the way up through grad school. But we stayed together for some reason. That was God's grace. I don't know why. And, but through that time, I was like, I stayed with her for so long. I was like, all right, I know that I love you, right? But I need you to get rid of this nonsense of religion and Christianity and everything else. So I was like, I'll prove you wrong. And she wasn't someone who had like all the intellectual answers of, she wasn't going to be able to respond to deep theological questions or anything like that. So I was like, I'll do my research. And I'm an obsessive nature from what I do for Christ Center Capital and everything. I have a very obsessive nature. So like when I start on something, I have tunnel vision that whole time. So I read everything I could get my hands on, listened to every single lecture, every single debate, classes, all this stuff. And long story made short, I became kind of the most reluctant convert in Florida at the time. So the famous C.S. Lewis line, he was like the most reluctant convert in London. I was definitely the most reluctant convert in Florida because I read so much. I mean, I did the Catechism cover to cover. I read the Summa Theologia. Read the Confessions. I read, the Quran, and I read everything that I could get my hands on. Listened to every debate. Listened to every lecture. Read every book by like the new atheists and everything. And even though I wanted like the new atheists to be right, I wanted Catholicism. I wanted Christianity specifically to be wrong. I was like, anything but, please. I couldn't. I don't know. I just couldn't. I could not admit. Or I could not accept that atheism was true. Like I couldn't, there was so much in me that like, even though I didn't want Christianity to be true, like it was just this pull. And I didn't want it to be there. I was very, very opposed to it, but finally I just had to get on my knees and say.
So what was like the first thing that you read from a Christian that made you think, oh, hang on a second, like this might actually be true? Do you have like does something stick out in your mind?
So it's an overused quote, but St. Augustine, when he said, "The heart is restless until it rests in thee," and I was like, because at the time I had kind of accomplished my goals, right? I played college basketball. I was doing really well in school. I graduated my undergrad and grad school combined in like 4.5 years. I was on like an accelerated program and everything, and I had good job offers and stuff. And I realized that there was truth to what St. Augustine said in that quote. And that I remember being one of the first points where like, all right, I really got to think about this now because my heart is restless. And I've achieved the things I want to achieve, but I'm still... hindsight being 2020, I was miserable. I didn't quite realize I was miserable at the time, but then I realized, getting to know my wife and getting to know people who kind of took their faith a little bit more seriously, I was like, I'm more successful than these people, but they seem to be a lot happier than me, and that bugged me. And then going through and reading everything, and that's the one quote I think always it always stands out to me.
What about during the debates that you watched, or like reading the Quran or reading the Summa Theologia? Was there like a specific kind of like evidence that maybe stuck out to you? Was there a sort of an argument for the existence of God that you were like, oh yeah, actually, I don't really know how to respond to this?
So the argument from extreme skepticism, I don't know if you were familiar with it or if it was something that I read. It was then I kind of formulated it myself, and I definitely did not have an answer for it. And it's kind of a long one, but if you want, I can go through it.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So the argument of extreme skepticism kind of goes like this, and for all the theologians out there and stuff, I might butcher it, so please, have mercy on me. But so we all might be in a simulation right now, right? We could just be a brain in a vat, like we could be, test tubes hooked up to us, you're a figment of whatever computer simulation, or I'm a figment of whatever computer simulation you're in, whatever it is. So that's like the extreme skepticism part. We could just be, but the thing that we know for sure is that existence exists. Right? That's the one thing we can know for sure from a point of extreme skepticism. And from knowing that existence exists, we know that the essence of existence exists. And we're like, what is an essence? And an essence is the fullness of a thing that is, the fullness of a thing that is allowing that thing to exist, right? So we talk about, the essence of the color blue or the essence of light. Well, there has to be something that is like perfectly blue or perfectly light to, be able to have those things come to fruition. So the essence of existence exists. And then it's like, what is the essence of existence? Well, the essence of existence, and there's a lot of like little caveats I can put in here, but the essence of existence essentially is there's no potentiality in it. It's complete actualization. If it's complete actualization, that means, it's all powerful, all knowing, those kind of things. And if something is, and I always said, well, yeah, but it's not all good. But if something's all powerful and if something's all knowing, it would therefore have to be all good. Because if it's all powerful and all knowing, like the only reason we make bad decisions is because we're not all knowing or we're not all powerful. If you're an alcoholic and you continue to drink, it's because you either don't have the power to stop or you don't have the knowledge that it is bad. If you have both the power, the ultimate willpower, and the ultimate knowledge, you wouldn't therefore drink. And from the essence of existence, being that it's all powerful and all knowledgeable because it has no potentiality in it, that means that essence of existence, or as St. Thomas Aquinas and all the theologians out there put it, esse, is it's only going to create if that creation is good. Because it would not create if it was bad, because it would know that it was bad and it would have the power not to. So that whole argument, like really, really hit me hard. And I came across that argument when I was already starting to lean towards Christianity, even though I didn't want to. And when I found that argument, oh man, I was like, I racked my brain around it for months. Like, I almost didn't do anything else, just racking my brain around it and trying to figure it out of like a way out. And I couldn't figure a way out. And then I started thinking, well, it doesn't mean that Christianity is true. And then that argument continues to go down a path where it's like, so if you have this esse, this essence of existence, that's all powerful, all knowing, and therefore all good, and it created, so the creation must be good, and it must care about the creation, because if the creation's good, why would it not care about it? So that means that this essence of existence must have like a, it must, since it cares about the existence, it cares about the creation, it must be evangelistic in some nature, not like exclusionary. Like it must be caring about its creation in its whole. So then you start to think about, all right, well, what worldview, what religion or what philosophy really has this two components, right? It has the evangelistic component and it has a prevalence component. Because if it's all good and all powerful, it's going to try to evangelize and it's going to be prevalent in society. Not just prevalent in one country or one area or one continent, but prevalent in like the whole of creation. And when you think about it that way, there's only really two answers, and that's Islam or Christianity. Because
I don't even think Islam would fall under that category, because
it
Islam
probably doesn't.
It's so centrally located. Like if you look at the demographics of Islam, it's just like the Middle East is the hub of Islam. And then if you look at the demographics of Christianity, sorry to like kind of butt in here.
No, please.
But Christianity is just all, literally the phrase all over the map, that's Christianity. It's like, it's in China, it's in Africa, it's everywhere. Like it's not just in Europe, it's not just in America, it's everywhere.
Yeah, so that really hit me because, and we know that like Judaism isn't, because there's like there's like 6 million Jews on the face of the planet right now. It's not like they actively kind of stop people from entering their religion. And like, as you said, if we're really talking about prevalent, yeah, Christianity is much more prevalent than Islam. And then when you take that, and I've read, you read the Bible cover to cover, you read the Quran cover to cover, and you're like, yeah, so the only thing that fits that essence of existence is the Christian God. And I mean, what God cares more about its creation than sending its own son to die? And yeah, all of those things, just that whole argument. And the funny thing is I read everything I could get my hands on. I probably could argue both positions better than the majority of people.
Both positions is in
theism and atheism, Christianity, or anything opposed to Christianity. And I knew so many answers, but I was still resistant until the point where I finally got on my knees and I remember I say the prayer every day. It's your will be done, not mine. It's just your will. If you're out there, if you exist, your will be done, not mine. And then from there, that's when I kind of invited God in, and he kicked me in the teeth. And I think I needed to. Some people he's gentle with. Some people he kind of throws into the fire, and I definitely needed to be thrown into the fire. And yeah, that's kind of how it went. And so it's funny because I had all the intellectual answers, I guess, or most of them, or a good majority of them, and but I still didn't concede until I actually prayed openly and vulnerably.
So one thing that's kind of stuck out of my mind is I know kind of how atheists are going to respond to your testimony, and they're going to say that, oh, it's all because of your wife, or it's all because of your girlfriend at the time.
Yeah, girlfriend. We got married at the time when I was 25. So
okay. So how would you respond to that? Do you think that you're it's all because of her, that you would have?
No, I mean, obviously God used her to kind of pull me in, but I was so adamant about proving her wrong, and she knew that I was on this mission to prove her wrong. And
how did she react to that? Was she just
it's funny because she didn't have I said, those intellectual answers. She was someone who, more of a blind faith, but a very devout faith. And she just had confidence. She had confidence. She was like, all right, go ahead.
Yeah.
She was like, I might not have the answer, but I know there's an answer. So she was very confident with it. And so she was confident that I would find the answers, but the one thing that baffles my mind is that she was confident that I would accept the answers, because I was so biased in my pursuit. I wanted Christianity, Catholicism specifically, to be wrong so badly, so passionately, that that was something that kind of surprised me about her at the time. Of she was confident that I would find the right answers, but she was also confident that I would accept them. And I did not want to in any way, shape, or form. And at the end of my pursuit, at the end of my journey to Christianity, of course we're always still journeying, but when I kind of dismissed my atheism and accepted, it wasn't about her at all. It just wasn't. It was about my own kind of wrestling with God, because at the time it was I was so set on the truth that I didn't care what came of it. I got to that point where when I first started out, I was biased. I was really, really biased. But then I got to a point where I was so obsessive, because I have an obsessive personality. I have an obsessive nature about me. And I just wanted to find out the truth so badly. And when it was the truth that I didn't really initially want, I was just well, I said I wanted the truth, and I got it. So
yeah. Was there a point where your affections sort of changed, where you really didn't want it to be true, but then eventually you started to maybe see the beauty in Christianity and Catholicism, that you wanted to you actually started to change from wanting it to be false to wanting it to be true? Was there a time when that happened, or were you just reluctant the whole way?
I was reluctant pretty much the whole way until after, when I finally engaged in that open and vulnerable prayer. I hadn't really prayed. I read a lot. I listened a lot. I never really prayed. And then when I finally did that kind of, I would keep saying the open and vulnerable prayer, because I think a lot of people pray and, they're please God, let me win the lottery, that kind of thing. But if it's when you're saying, please God, show me your will, allow your will to be done, not mine. Correct my own. If you're out there, please correct my own, like, my own sin in me and everything like that. Then once I made that prayer, then I kind of changed my tune. Even though I would consider myself a convert by then, I was a reluctant convert. And then when I started engaging in that kind of prayer, that genuine prayer, that's when I was like, all right, now I'm more happy about my conversion. I'm more joyful about it. I'm more accepting of it. I'm not giving opposition to it.
So now let's talk about, we talked about your journey from atheism to Christianity, but how about your journey to Catholicism? Like, what was that like? Was there like a specific thing that kind of came up where you were like, now I'm convinced that some form of Christianity is true, but is it the Catholic Church? Was there something that you read or something that convinced you that Catholicism was also true?
Yeah, so for the majority of, or for the first little stint of me being a Christian, it was more of like a mere Christianity. You know, again, going back to C.S. Lewis. I knew my wife was still Catholic at the time, or still is Catholic, but I said, I feel like I had racked my brain so much on just trying to figure out Christianity. I was like, now I got to figure, I would be in that position that you're in now. Like, I got to figure out all these denominations, and I'm like, my mind's tired. I don't want to do this anymore. But though I realized at that point, I think I've talked to you on the phone about this, is I was so mentally exhausted from that journey to Christianity, probably because of my own fault, like just resisting it so much, that I didn't want to go on another journey that you're on, which you can attest to how exhausting it is. And I was like, wait a second. When I did that genuine prayer and I asked for his will to be done, I asked for him to guide me, I asked for, like, don't let me get in my own way. Once I said that prayer, I felt like things just fell out of the sky into my lap and just kind of kept pointing me towards Catholicism. And I started realizing the beauty of the fullness of the faith of the Catholic Church. And that was a much easier journey for me. It was a much easier journey, and it just kind of fell into my lap. I started listening to conversion stories a lot, just because it was something that, like, I could relate to, and it was really cool at that point where I was like, when I'm listening to conversion stories, like, oh yeah, I remember that point in mine, and blah blah blah. And it just happened to be a lot of the conversion stories I was listening to were people like going towards Catholicism, going into Catholicism, and I was like, I still am reading every day, and I still ask for God's correction every day, but yeah, that journey was much easier for me. I'll leave it at that.
Let's transition to talking about your time at the NBA, and like, what was that like, and how did that like factor into what you currently do now with Christ Center Capital?
Yeah, so I went to school for international economics. So I always thought I was going to be kind of like a Wall Street guy. Mm-hmm. And before I was even Christian, I said, no, I don't want to do that. I got a little taste of it. And it was only because of laziness. Like, it was a kind of a bad character flaw of mine. Like, it was laziness. I saw it and I was like, these guys are working 70 hours a week. These guys are, kind of in that rat race, and, it's dog eat dog world and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And for no other reason other than that I was lazy. I wasn't thinking like, oh, I wouldn't get to spend time with family. None of that was on my mind at the time. It was just like, nah, that seems like too much work. So I got out of grad school and I started bouncing around as like a financial analyst to a bunch of jobs. I hated all of them. Like, they all were just like jobs sitting in a nothing against people who sit in cubicles and all that stuff, but like, I was like sitting in these jobs and I just felt like I was wasting away, and I despised it. And then I saw a job for I'm always browsing the job boards, and I see this job for the NBA come up. And my wife and I, like, as I've said, like, we both play college basketball. Basketball is a big part of our lives and all that. So I was like, I would love to work at the NBA. At this time, I'm living in Pennsylvania. The headquarters for the NBA is in Secaucus, New Jersey, so it's about an hour away from where I was living. And I put in for an entry-level job for what they call a game logger. So at the NBA, they kind of do this ring of fire for new people to come in because it's the NBA. Like everyone wants to work for the NBA, right?
Yeah.
You know? So they had bring in like, at the time, they would bring in like 20, 25 new people, somewhat fresh out of college, and they would make them work like night shifts and everything, and you'd be a game logger. So what you're doing is like, as the game's going on, you have to like make sure the stats are coming in correctly. You have to like clip off possessions so editors and TV stations and everything can use them. You have to make sure that no one's getting triple doubles they're not supposed to, or getting, you know, all that stuff. So you're kind of like a quality checker guy, and it's kind of really hard because it's fast paced. It's bit of a fire. If you mess up on something, like you hear it, like you're so it's kind of like this ring of fire they put you through. And I mean, out of my class that came into the NBA, there was like 25 of us. I mean, by the end of the first season, there was only like 13 of us left. Like, because it's like a difficult job. You get an East Coast team and a West Coast team. You're in Secaucus, New Jersey, so that's on the East Coast. And like my West Coast team, my first year was the Portland Trail Blazers. So when they have a 10 o'clock game on the East Coast, and then you got to do all the stats and everything after the game end, you're not getting out of there till 4 or 5 a.m. And it's kind of rough. And then you might have an East Coast game the very next day, so you're like getting out at 4 a.m., but you got to be back at like 6 o'clock that day or whatever. So it's a tough go. And then if you make it out of there, so anyway, I put in for that job, and I had no production experience. They wanted you to have like production experience to get into that job. Well, I used to coach at IMG Academies. So IMG Academies is like the leading preparatory school for athletics in the country. They're in Bradenton, Florida. So basically people who like, they want D1 scholarships. They want college scholarships for basketball, football, soccer, golf, everything, swimming. They have every sport there. They would say they didn't get the offers they wanted to. They would spend an extra preparatory year at like IMG Academies where like they make sure you get your SAT scores up, but they're just training you in whatever sport you choose. Very expensive school, very expensive preparatory school, but they are great at producing awesome athletes. And I was a skills coach there for basketball after I graduated. And IMG had I promise I'm tying all this together. IMG put football as their newest sport, right? And the hiring manager for the NBA was taking a New Jersey team down. They were like big into football. The hiring manager for the NBA was taking their team from New Jersey down to play IMG Academy's like prep team, right? And she saw a resume come up, IMG Academies. So they brought me in. They never asked me one question about the NBA. They never asked me anything. They just asked me all about IMG. They were like, what are you, because there was just this hiring manager happened to like be passionate about football and knew that the one team was just started in IMG. So they're just asking me questions and stuff. And they're like, you seem like a nice enough guy. You don't really have the background that we need for the production, but we'll give you a shot at it. So I started at the NBA and then made it through the first year, and then the business operations department picked me up because of my background of managing money. And then I spent 5 years working there. And the business operations department is literally just like money managing, schedule managing, budgeting, macro budgets. The NBA, I mean, they're a $10 billion revenue organization every year. So our business operations team, like we handled quite a bit of money and all that stuff.
Yeah. So what was your day-to-day like? Were you like working like 8 to 5?
It was kind of odd. They were very, as long as you got your work done, you could come in whenever you please,
nice.
kind of thing. And we would, of course, travel quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of departments travel way more than I did, but, we would go to NBA Finals, you go to NBA All-Star, and you travel to all these major events the NBA has. And I never went overseas, but a lot of people would go overseas for like global games. And because, the NBA is arguably the most popular sports league in the world. A lot of people would say that some of the soccer leagues in Europe are, but globally speaking, like just the amount of like social media followers and stuff, the NBA is always the leader. Now here in the US, the NFL beats us out in the US, but I say us like I still work there, but the NBA globally, mostly because of like China, India, so huge populations, and they love their basketball. They love basketball. So we're pretty much the most famous global league and so there would be a lot of travel involved and stuff like that.
So put me on the timeline of your journey from atheism to Catholicism, and in terms of like where you were with the MBA as well. So like during like halfway through your tenure there, were you starting to look into things?
Yeah. So by the time that I had started with the MBA, I was very close to that full-on conversion. It took a little while for those Christian moral convictions to really take root in me. So at the time that I was at the MBA, I would say the first like year or two I was there, I was still like very much a reluctant Christian, or not quite a Christian yet. And then by year 3 or whatever, I had really committed. And then by the time I left the MBA, that's when like those Christian moral convictions really started to take root, and I started to develop some problems with the MBA of like working there and all the things that they were doing, and a lot of the political grandstanding and stuff like that. I started to really develop some issues with, and then of course all the time while I'm working at the MBA, I'm investing for myself, right? So I never managed money for anyone else. I never really got into that game, but my degrees were in international economics, so I played the market myself, and I did well for myself. And it was kind of fun when, like I keep saying, when those moral convictions took root in me, I realized that all the ways that I was making money was not something I was really proud about. So the investments I was making, that I was making money off of, the paycheck I was receiving from the MBA, were just not things that, and at this time now, me and my wife have 2 kids going on 3 kids, and I'm like, I'm starting to make our home a Christian home, and I'm trying to implement those values, but then the way that I'm funding my home, the way that I'm paying for my home, the way that I'm putting food on the table are kind of counter to those Christian values. And I was like, my kids are still really young, but I'm like, if they get older and they start asking questions and like they see what dad does for a living and everything, like those are going to be tough questions to answer. So I had like some conversations with my wife, and then this is the next step in the journey of like, all right, I got to leave the MBA for moral purposes, and I got to divest for moral purposes. No idea what I'm going to do after that, but these are like the really strong convictions we felt, and we kind of
I don't think a lot of people would be able to do what you did with that, where you're like, you realize what you're investing in, what you're doing, like your actual 9-to-5 job is, immoral in so many ways. I just don't think a lot of people would be able to make that decision, to make that jump. So what was it like? What?
So I have great stories for this.
Okay, I was gonna say, was there like some kind of spiritual experience that you had where you were like, all right, I have to, like, Jesus came to you in a dream? Like, what happened?
Wow. So there's, man, so much. I'm trying to figure out which one to tell first, but like, I had so much pushing from God himself to like leave, right? My wife kind of had the feeling, like Taylor's name, my wife, she's amazing. She had the feeling that I was going to leave the NBA for like 3 years. Because she saw from like more of a macro level what was going on in me internally, more than what I saw myself. And she kind of, I guess, predicted that wall that I was going to run into. And the NBA started becoming, I'll get a little political here, so excuse me if I offend anybody, but like the NBA started becoming more and more woke the last like 2 years I was there.
Okay.
So I quit actually a year ago yesterday. That's when I quit the NBA. And they were putting us through like critical race theory training. They were putting us through, on our NBA portal, you could pick from up teen different gender pronouns to label yourself as. Like the NBA was like, we were fine taking money from China, that was committing the Uyghur genocide, but we would speak out against common sense voter laws in Georgia. Like it was just a lot of things going on that I'm like, man, this is just like, it's getting harder and harder to stomach because it seems to be more and more counter to like my Christian values. And I worked for a brief stint in kind of the live production entertainment section of the NBA. And like we had halftime shows where kids were sitting courtside and like, you know, women are barely dressed and, you know, this kind of thing. And I'm just like, this is not something that like I'm proud about. Like when I first started working for the NBA, it was my 17-year-old self's dream job because, you know, I didn't have any of those Christian moral convictions. My life was basketball and I liked to manage money. And that's kind of what we were doing at the NBA. And I realize now is like what I used to be proud of. Now I like don't even want to tell people I work for the NBA. I used to love to tell my friends from high school and stuff, yeah, I work for the NBA now and blah blah blah, like brag about it. And now like I don't want anyone to know where I work. Like I don't even like to wear the polo that has the NBA logo on it and everything. Because at the time my wife and I are like giving talks about like sports and identity in God, and like we're getting into that public space of speaking and everything. Because I told you right before we started filming, like, you know, she had a bunch of injuries. I was like kind of that guy, all-star in high school and then like end of the bench in college. And we got basketball like taken away from us and we both became very miserable. So we talked to kids a lot about that, that, you know, find your identity in God, not your sport, not your job, not anything else. And I was like, I'm giving these talks. I'm like talking to my friends and my family about, you know, Christian values and all this stuff. And I'm going back to the NBA that's like completely opposed to it. And I was like, all right. And at the same time, a good friend, a mutual friend of Matt Frad's, Jacob Imam, who runs the site New Polity, I listened to him on Pints with Aquinas once, and he's this guy who he pretty much has the same views as me as investing, and he was also someone who did really, really well investing for himself. I'm listening to him talk about the morality behind investing. And then I start to be like, morality behind investing? This is while I'm thinking about leaving the NBA. And I'm like, I can leave the NBA. I can just be a full-time investor, right? That's my backup plan. And I'm thinking about morality of investing. So I go back, I look at my 401k, my personal portfolio and everything, and I'm like, I'm making money off of all the organizations that I complain about. The Amazons, the Microsofts, the Apples, the Netflix, all of these companies that are funding Planned Parenthood, they're funding abortion industries, they're supporting the Equality Act of like transgender legislation, they're using child labor and forced labor overseas. They have unethical mining practice, like all of these different things going on. And I'm like, these are what I'm making money off of. And all of that comes together. And I'm like, I go to my wife and I'm saying, I think I got to leave the NBA and my backup plan's kind of junked because I got to divest. I can't keep investing in these companies that are making us money.
Yeah.
And
you can't do one without the other. It's like you couldn't just leave the NBA for those reasons and then leave all of your investments there.
And so and then the funny thing so I left the NBA during like this kind of like job crisis where no one wants to work and, you know, people are paying $18 an hour to work at McDonald's and that kind of thing. And me and the NBA didn't exactly see eye to eye on things, but I had a really good relationship with my boss. He was a really good guy. And
did you ever tell him stuff? Did you ever like?
Yeah, he knew where I was coming from. And honestly, not him. Like I won't say this about him or any other people at the NBA, but some people who were more like vested, older than me, kids in college, that kind of thing. They're like, I might leave too if I was in your position, like younger and that all that. But anyway, so he kind of knew where I was coming from, and I gave my 2-week notice at the NBA, and I kid you not, this is a story from God. It's got to be, because I give my 2-week notice at the NBA. I tell everybody I'm leaving the NBA, you know, sister, parents, in-laws, friends, everybody. Because I don't want to be a hypocrite, because I know that they're going to come back with like an offer, you know, more money, better benefits, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I put in my 2-week notice the Thursday before my last day. My boss says, hey, I know that you're kind of leaving on principle, but here's the offer. You know, you'll probably get made into this position or whatever if you stay. And I was like, I knew that was coming in. Within a minute, maybe 2 minutes, I get an email from the deputy commissioner of the NBA, Mark Tatum, you know, head honcho under Adam Silver, for those who don't know basketball that much. But I get an email from him, company-wide email. The NBA is officially partnering with an organization called Athlete Ally. Athlete Ally operates down in Florida, and their sole purpose is to allow transgender women, biological men, to compete at the middle school and high school level sports and female sports. So Athlete Ally's sole purpose is to let boys who claim to be women compete in middle school and high school sports. Now, I started this interview one time telling you that, like, my wife was a 1,000-point scorer. She was an awesome player. We both played Division II. I was Joe Schmo at the end of the bench. If me and her play one-on-one, I'm going to kill her. Like, I'm a 190-pound man. She's a 5'3", 100 and whatever pound girl. Like, there's no comparison there. I was like, this is ridiculous. And I mean, so I got that offer email. Then I got the email about Athlete Ally, and I was like, all right, that's my sign. I really got to get out. So I got out and I divested all my investments, my personal portfolio, my 401k, and then me and my wife looked at each other and we're like, all right, what do we do now? And I said, you know what? I'll go work for one of these new BRI firms. The BRI firms are biblically responsible investing. You know, Christian investment firms that are kind of in opposition to the Morgan Stanleys, Vanguards of the world. And I started doing my research on a lot of those companies, and I didn't really like what I found. I wanted them to be stricter. They were taking out explicit abortion providers, but they were leaving in the companies that would fund abortion providers to the tunes of $500,000, millions of dollars a year. They were taking out explicit pornographers, but they were leaving in companies that helped promote and produce pornographic content. And I was like, and these are, you know, things like the Knights of Columbus and the Ave Maria Fund and things like that just weren't as strict as I wanted them to be. And then I realized, well, people need to know about this information. I contacted Jacob Imam from the Pints with Aquinas interview, and I was like, listen, you struck a chord in my heart. I know what's going on, and like, I really want to do something to help this out. And I came up with the idea that in today's world, people can trade commission-free on any number of platforms. I mean, on Robinhood, you can trade commission-free for like up to, I think it's like $5 million or something like that. So people don't really need brokers anymore. They just need quality information. So not only do they, but in my eyes, they don't only need quality information about the financial potential of an investment, but they need moral information of that investment. Mm. What is it funding? How is it funding it? What is it doing with money? Like, what is it supporting? Is it a company that has a business model that's promoting the common good, or are they just making, you know, carbonated sugar water that's leading to mass diabetes and weight gain in the U.S.? Like, what are those? What kind of information is there? So I thought of myself, and I said, I can create essentially like a stock picking, investment recommending website, and I can pull the information from the market that is being recommended. So like if there's a crypto being recommended, an ETF, a stock, or whatever, an alternative investment of some sort, if those things are being recommended by the market as a whole, I'll take that, put it into a report, and I'll apply moral analysis to it. And I'll let people know, like, hey, this asset's funding abortion. This asset is funding really bad politicians. This asset is doing some really nefarious things overseas. This asset's pretty good. It just focuses on business and does the right thing. And then I kind of let the investors, you know, take that information and do what they please with it. Mm-hmm. And I started that about 6 months after I left the NBA. And that's kind of what both me and my wife are really doing full time right now.
So tell me about the recent thing that just happened. Because originally this was, you had the idea of making this a sort of paid service where people could pay a monthly subscription fee and get all of this information. But now recently, as in like less than a month ago, I think you recently changed your entire business model to be 100% free. So tell me, like, what's the story behind that? Like, why did you change the business model?
So in the first couple months, I was originally like, I wanted to make this content accessible to as many people as possible. That was the idea. So I was like, oh, I'll just make it like $7 a month, because it's not free to produce. Like, I got to curate a lot of information. I got to do a lot of research, and I do have people helping me with that research, but it's still like, it's very time consuming and everything. But I was like, let's make it $7 a month. And then I started getting testimonials come in, and people were saying like, I divested X amount of dollars from, X, Y, and Z stocks that were supporting this because of the stuff I found out on Christ Center Capital. And I was like, and the draw that Christ Center Capital has is I'm giving out information on like timely investments. I don't just have this like broad category or catalog of investments. I'm saying every week I'm producing content on what the market is actually recommending that week. So you can take my information and actually, use it to invest timely. But I started getting these testimonies come in of like people divesting and people like, realigning their investment lives with like their Christian lives. And at the same time, I went down to a Theology of the Body conference outside of Philly with, Christopher West. Are you familiar? No. So Theology of the Body, that's John Paul II's teaching, sex, love, and marriage and all that kind of stuff, male and female. And it's like, it's really popular, I guess, in the Catholic world, but Christopher West is a public speaker on the theology of the body. And down at this conference, I think he's been on Pints with Aquinas a couple of times and stuff like that. And down at this Theology of the Body, we had some like pretty prominent speakers. You had Father Mike Schmitz, you had Jeff Cavins, the Bible in the Year gang, and Jason Everett, like a bunch of these like speakers, and they're all talking about like the theology of the body. And I'm just listening and taking it in. It was something I went to just kind of, to get away for a weekend and, kind of be fed spiritually a little bit. And I got to have a conversation with Christopher West, actually, a very brief conversation. And right after all these testimonies started coming in, I was having a conversation with him, and I was like, I really think God's calling me to like make this content free and like put the information out to as many people as possible. And I'm like, I keep cutting off the ways that I'm going to like make money for my family. I keep cutting off these different arms of revenue generators to like, put food on the table and everything. But I was like, after these testimonies, like, I was only charging $7 a month, but that still requires someone to reach into their back pocket, take out a card, put in the numbers, and like, people are lazy.
There's still a barrier.
There's still a barrier to entry. There's still a barrier there. And I was like, I don't want a barrier there, because people need to know this, because the Christian households in the United States alone manage something like $3 trillion. That's with a T, $3 trillion funnel through Christian households. And if only 10% of that's invested into the market, which probably more is, because just about everybody and their brother has a 401k or IRA or something that's passively invested. You don't actually know the assets that's being invested there. Like, if at least 5% of these Christians, 10% of these Christians were able to like realize this and start to actually divest, there would be drastic changes culturally, because the way that we invest is one of the number one ways that we can impact the culture around us, because the culture around us is dictated by the major corporations, and the major corporations, they care about what their shareholders want. So like, people will say Coca-Cola is a really woke company. They do a lot of things that, maybe the Christian mindset wouldn't agree with. But I guarantee you, if, the Christian investment population started divesting, tomorrow from Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola will come out and change their tune on a lot of different issues, because the corporations, they care about profits. They're trying to appease whatever majority is the loudest. And if we speak, and the loudest actions we can take are the actions with our money, right? Because unfortunately, in this secular world ruled by Satan, money makes the world go round. We wish it was love, but money is what makes the world go round. So we really need to take action with our investments. And so all this is coming to my mind. I'm talking to Christopher West. He's a great public speaker, and I'm talking to a bunch of different people, like people that I really trust, mentors and everything. And they're like, hey, you should probably just get rid of the paywall and just let the content be free. And then I replaced the paywall with a pledge wall. You know, like you can come in, you can give as little $1 a month, or you can give as much as you want. But the more money that we get coming in, the better we can promote the moral investing content, and the more content we can produce, because it's not just the US. I mean, every country has their own stock exchange. I've had so many people from Canada say, hey, can you do the same thing for us up here, of like, you know, the different companies that are on their stock exchange? And I was like, I would love to, but we don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah.
So we, after a lot of prayer, a lot of conversations with my wife, a lot of conversations with just a lot of people I trust, it was like, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make this free, and we're going to see where it lies and where the chips fall. And it's kind of a funny thing, because I used to have so much security financially, and now I have no security financially at all. And I find myself to be a lot more joyful. And a friend of mine just recently said that security seems to be a barrier to joy and happiness. Insecurity seems to promote joy and happiness if you accept it properly. And I'm kind of finding that to be true in the actual practice of it. Because I used to have so much financial security, and I was pretty miserable. And now I have literally no financial security, and I find a lot more joy in my life. And it's seems to be counterintuitive, but it's definitely the way it's been going.
So I think we've like talked about everything but the actual like name of the company and the website and everything. So so it's christcenteredcapital.com. What can people get, like, if they go to the website right now? Like, what do they just sign up and they can pledge? What else can they do on the website?
Yeah, so you can go to Christ Centered Capital. We strongly suggest, this is one of the ways that hopefully we can actually produce money to revenue to actually fund it, is sign up for the newsletter. Please sign up for the newsletter. It's completely free. Everything on the site is completely free. But if you sign up for the newsletter, that gives us a pull of saying like, hey, this many people care about moral investing. And that's like our number one metric. So please sign up for the newsletter. It's right there on the homepage, christcenteredcapital.com. You just type in your name, phone number, email kind of thing, and that helps us so much. And of course, if you feel called to give like a financial pledge, that's great too. But I think our last report just came out on this past Friday. There was about 8 assets that made it into our report. They're timely assets. You can go check that out. It's completely free. We rate them. If you explore our website, there's so many different things. There's a lot of like DIY, do-it-yourself investing context. We really encourage people not to be passive investors, but to be active investors. That's really key to be a moral investor, because you don't want to reap where you have not sown. Like, even if you're investing into stocks and everything, like, you participate in those shareholder meetings. Maybe you feel like your voice is minuscule, or you know, you only own 1 or 2 shares, your vote doesn't really count. Participate. Like, be an active investor, know what you're investing in, and all of the content on our site is geared to help you do that. We have mock portfolios. If you're someone who just wants to dabble into getting started investing for yourself, we give you a bunch of assets that have passed our moral screening tests, and you can, we divvy them up percentage-wise. You can invest for yourself, copying that if you want to do so. And we have, our rating system is color-coded. So if you go to our site, red assets that are stocks, bonds, crypto, ETFs, all that stuff that are highlighted red, those failed our moral screening tests. Our colors are gold and purple, so the purple assets, the assets are highlighted purple. They passed, but not exactly with flying colors. Like, there's still some, you know, little pockets of things that we don't really like about those. And then we have the gold assets, which are few and far between, as you could imagine, because in reality, there's only about 4 or 5 Christian companies that are publicly traded on the stock exchange right now, and out of literally 14,000 or something like that. So, but the gold assets are the ones that really pass those moral screening tests with flying colors, and you know, a Christian could probably feel good about investing in those. But
yeah,
we still say make sure that you invest and participate. Like if you're investing even in one of those gold assets that they're not doing anything nefarious with your money or anything like that, they're just focusing on their business, doing their business well, like still participate in the shareholder meetings, because you never know when those companies could go the other way. You know, we have companies that come in and out of good graces all the time as we monitor them.
So as we close out is there anything that we sort of haven't discussed about your story, even just about Christ Center Capital? Is there anything that we haven't really touched on that we need to mention?
No, I think we covered it pretty much. The one thing,
what would you leave with the audience?
I want to leave people with this, and it's whenever you invest in something, that means you want that something to grow in power and influence. So really think about that in your investing world. As you look at your 401ks, as you look at your IRAs, as you look at your personal portfolios, know that whatever you invest in, that means you want that thing, that person, whatever it is, to grow in power and influence. And you'll probably find that a lot of the things in your portfolios are not things you want to grow in power and influence and really influence culture. Because remember, it's great to go protest things and, you know, to take to the streets and, you know, have YouTube channels and all this stuff. But words are words, you know. Actions always speak louder than words, right? We've learned that when we were like little kids. And investing is true action, because when you take action with your money, with your pocket, you know, with your bank accounts, that usually speaks the loudest. And so I say we have a little saying at Christ Center Capital, and it's, you know, Christian investing equals a Christian culture, because secular investing equals a secular culture. So if you really want to influence the culture, you got to take a look at how you're investing.
Yeah, and that's something that, I mean, as you've been talking today, that's something that I've got to think more about too, is these investments that you're doing. Yeah, it does seem like it is going to affect things to a pretty severe degree, or at least it can.
Yeah, it can if you get enough people behind it.
Exactly, and that's kind of the idea of it.
Yeah.
Well, Marc, thanks for coming on to Capturing Christianity. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
we've covered a lot of ground, and your story is just so cool. I'm so glad that we could get it out for the public. So thanks for coming on. It's been awesome.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining me today on Capturing Christianity. I've been Cameron Bertuzzi with Marc Lozano, and I will see you in the next Capturing Christianity video very soon.